when you're doing like transformation in the small, and what I would say transformation in the small is you're doing like, teams of 5 or 6 people, everybody's co-located and all that kind of stuff. It's relatively straightforward because you can generally get people in the room. But one of the things that we observed fairly early on is that when you're starting to do transformation in large scale organizations, it's like you need a way to figure out like how to group the work and how to organize people around the work of transformation so that everybody has a really clear objective around what it is we're trying to do. We learned that it was really important to be able to measure progress in a very transparent and really obvious way so that our stakeholders could understand like where we were going in the transformation. So the first thing I want to explore with you a little bit, Dennis, is we have this idea within Leading Agile of expeditions and base camps. So just as a foundation, let's talk a little bit, let's just first talk about like what is an expedition in our world?
An expedition is a part of the organization that needs to be transformed together. And it's not just delivery teams, it's delivery teams, it's the getting the backlogs to them, it's the portfolio, it's the orchestration around actually getting product through part of the organization. But when we go look at a slice of the organization, top to bottom, we call that an expedition.
So kind of maybe similar to like a value stream concept in SAFe, a little bit different, but maybe similar?
Could be a value stream in SAFe. We do them around products sometimes, we do them around capabilities sometimes, but it makes sense for that group to move to a new place intact.
So we have a defined group of people that are very clearly associated with this expedition.
That's right.
So talk to me a little bit about then like this idea of a base camp. So what is a base camp in our world?
So a base camp is a clear sort of outcome. It's an end state or an interim end state that part of the organization can move to that we know we've achieved a certain set of outcomes. So for example, at Basecamp 1, we've created stable teams. Mm-hmm. So we know that the team's been formed, they have a clear backlog, they can estimate a sprint, they understand their dependencies, they can plan and orchestrate within a release. So when we get that whole slice of the organization there, we call that Basecamp 1. Mm-hmm. And by getting really, really clear on what it means to get there, we can keep everybody sort of moving in the same direction towards that objective.
So we have a really clearly defined group of people moving towards a really clearly defined outcome. So it's kind of like moving like a release plan to like a release date or something like that. There's this really defined body of work moving towards a very specific outcome. Talk to us a little bit about like why that is such an important concept when we're all working remotely.
Well, it's important, regardless, but particularly when we're working remotely, we need to keep everybody aligned towards the same agenda, towards the same outcome. It's really just a, sort of straight up organizational change management. Get a compelling vision, align everybody around it, demonstrate progress towards that goal. So it's just getting people to understand where we're heading. And it's also important that it's not like a giant far in the future outcome, but it's an achievable outcome within their current conditions, because you want to have success within, 4 to 6 weeks of having something really accomplished that delivers business value. That gets you momentum and support organizationally around it as well.
So I'll tell you what was really fascinating for me is you and I have been building this out over the last couple of years and implementing this. One of the things that was a really interesting revelation, because we would say, okay, this group of people, we're going to this defined state, and everybody kind of thematically understood it. But then we had to kind of like take it one level down and say, well, it's insufficient just to say this is where we're going to be in 3 months. We had to kind of like almost like break down our backlog even further and go, okay, here's all the intermediate outcomes that we're going to, in effect, kind of move through our Kanban over the course of that 3 months, right? So here's the 10 or 12 things that we want to move through. So talk to us a little bit about how you and I evolved this idea of outcomes-based planning and what's involved in that.
There's this concept of, if you can look at, okay, I want my team to be stable and predictable. I want to be at Basecamp 1. What conditions have to exist in the organization for us to get there? And what we saw was, it wasn't a matter of like running a certain amount of trainings or producing a certain number of artifacts. It was how do we go create those conditions? And it turns out that there's probably dependencies between those conditions. And so we started just working backwards from what would it look like to be a predictable team, and what things would be in the organization. Would have the ability to build a clear backlog, would have the ability to manage those dependencies, would have the ability to have stable teams, would have it in a tool so we can measure our velocity. We came up with a set of, for Basecamp 1, a standard set of like 8 outcomes that we get to for a team to be predictable. And so those outcomes become interim targets that we can align around. So for the same reasons organizationally that the big outcome is critical, those smaller outcomes become necessary. There's some interesting things that happen in the organization that's afraid they can't move forward, and you have something that's 6 months out in advance or 4 months out in the future. If we can stick a stake in the ground 2 weeks out or 3 weeks out and get the whole organization to align around it and deliver, we have a well-formed team with all the roles and responsibilities defined, and we've taught them some basic practices for how they're going to work together, and we overcome all the obstacles that happen in the organization. We get a lot of personal buy-in. It motivates people to continue to move forward. It creates a lot of safety for the next sort of farther reaching, more difficult steps. And by decomposing it down to what we can control up front and assembling it up to the more complex problem, like if you start with release planning as your first outcome, there's just no way that you can do that. I don't know the capacity of the team. I don't think do. But if I can just go, we can get 6 people in a room dedicated to the team, supported, rolling in this process, we get a lot of buy-in from that. And we can get everybody to wrap their brain around aligning to produce that outcome.
So I don't want to go super deep into this with you, but we even took the outcomes and broke them down even further into activities that we could create activity guides around. So if you imagine like a story map, like we basically have like, it's almost like you have like a strategic theme up at the top that gets broken down into epics. Those are kind of like the expeditions in our world. Then they get broken down into user stories. Those are kind of like the outcomes. And then they get broken down into activities, which are kind of like the tasks. If you think about that kind of like a Mike Cone, agile estimating and planning kind of hierarchy. And so what's cool to me is that when we can put a tremendous amount of clarity around the work that we're trying to do, then that becomes like one of the biggest first steps to getting people appropriately organized around the work. And when you've got the people organized around the work and you have extreme clarity on what is going to get produced and when it's going to get produced, then it's like you've got these people all over the place and they're all working remote from homes, you know, over Zoom and things like that, using Miro and what have you. But it's like, it's super clear what all these people are building towards, and you can actually measure where you're at the end of that 2-week period or even at the end of the 3-month period.